All right. Hi, everyone. I am so happy to be joining the Drupal community this week. DrupalCon has been pretty awesome for me so far. So thank you to everyone who really has made this large virtual conference happen. I think we could probably dive on in. Today, I'll be speaking on the topic of continuity planning. We'll talk about how you can take stress and turn it into assurance for your teammates during times of uncertainty, such as a global pandemic. So my name is Megan Davis. I use the pronouns she and her, and I'm a program manager with Palantir.net. I'm joining DrupalCon today from Cape Cod, Massachusetts. Palantir.net is a full-service digital consultancy, and we design and develop solutions for healthcare, higher education, technology, and public sector clients using Drupal and other open source technologies. At Palantir, I manage complex digital projects and portfolios that cross sectors, and we have cross-functional teams. Now, prior to joining Palantir, I largely worked in the international development and humanitarian sector. And this is where I started to learn more about continuity planning and risk matrices in general before applying it to our work in the digital space at Palantir. So here's a brief overview of what we're going to be exploring together during this session. So we will start with the foundational concepts. So what is continuity planning and why do we talk about it? We'll then dive into the practice of continuity planning. So this is when you'll learn how to put continuity planning into place at your company or with your projects. We'll talk through how you can develop empathetic communication skills to support your teammates throughout the practice. Really here we're talking about building and fostering a psychologically safe environment for your teammates. I'll then walk you through step by step how to lead lightweight continuity planning exercises with a corresponding pre-mortem, and then conclude with how you can document and share out your action plan across a project and across your full company. So let's walk through some of the foundational concepts of continuity planning. So to start, what is it? What is continuity planning? Well, it's the process of creating systems of prevention and recovery to deal with potential disruptions in business. At the project level, and how we thought about it at Palantir.net across our projects was to think of continuity planning as developing a proactive plan that was created and owned by individual teams. This plan was designed to, if possible, prevent or lessen the impact of disruptions on projects. And the type of disruptions that we're talking about here really are ones that could jeopardize a project's overall success. Now, why do we talk about continuity planning and why now? Well, we've been immersed in the global pandemic for over a year now. And while change is a norm in today's workplace, the global pandemic has layered on a new challenge of uncertainty. And it's caused an overall increase in heightened fear, anxiety, and stress. So for this unique moment of repose that we're all living in, continuity planning really has never been more important. Continuity planning is an effective way to identify areas of vulnerability on your projects or at a company and to build effective contingency plans. So let's talk through a few of the illustrative examples of why we might use continuity planning, drawing from the past year. So at the start of the pandemic, there was such a high degree of uncertainty. One thing that came up a lot for me personally, for teammates, was what to do if I myself got sick. Um, what would happen to the projects that I was on? How long might I be out of the office? There was a high degree of uncertainty. And at the company level, when you think of like this question being asked across a series of projects, you had to ask the question, what if multiple people, even perhaps on the same project, needed to step away for health reasons? What would we do? And that's where continuity planning came into play. Something that certainly couldn't be fully predicted was the challenge that the pandemic would layer on for caregivers, whether the sick, of elderly, spouses, or children. Continuity planning, though, created a way to give our teammates the needed space that they needed if they need to step away to fulfill their roles as primary caregivers without jeopardizing the success of projects. And then finally, what we saw over the last year is that work can be impacted by life. And we know this all too well now. There are a number of reasons why any teammate may need to step away from their laptop. Sometimes life is hard, and continuity planning puts into place an actionable plan to allow that teammate to step away if they need it, and for the rest of the team to be able to move forward to ensure a successful project. All that brings me to the benefits of having a solid continuity planning practice. Um, so the overall goal of continuity planning, as uncomfortable as it may feel in the moment, really is to anticipate points of risk. It's intended to protect your teammates and your clients from any sort of severe disruption. And it allows your projects to recover more effectively and faster from setbacks. Now, after going through this process at Palantir on many projects across our various service lines, I did see an overall increase in team communication. There was certainly a greater trust that was built between team members on the same project. And we took all of the uncertainty that we were feeling and came up with a plan to reduce it overall. The general consensus after going through the practice I'll walk you through was that it turned stress into assurance. Projects could continue even if a teammate needed to step back. But perhaps what I saw as the greatest benefit of this practice was that it quickly identified and broke down silos within projects, both between roles and across disciplines. So let's talk about putting this concept of continuity planning into practice. Before even diving into the work or the workshops, we have to begin by building and fostering a psychologically safe environment for our teammates to discuss risk. During heightened times of stress, such as a pandemic, continuity planning has the potential to add on an additional layer of stress for teammates. And that's why I found framing continuity planning and in general, any sort of risk management exercise or workshop during these moments of stress, really the framing had to be done in such a way that it empowered teammates and lifted them up to create effective plans in case they needed to be out of the office. That framing was absolutely critical. And so as I was bringing teammates through this exercise, I frequently reminded them and myself that this may be uncomfortable, but rather than becoming overwhelmed, congratulate yourself that you detected a few risks before they even happened. So I try to use empathetic language to help teammates avoid frustration or discouragement throughout the process. Now, before we got our teams together to go through continuity planning, I would send the project team, or if you're doing this at the company level, the company an email. And it always started off really positive. So I would congratulate them on either hitting a really big milestone that week or having an excellent demo or doing some really exemplary work within that week. And then I would kind of dive into providing an overview to teammates of what they should expect, the type of information that they should have prepared for continuity planning exercises, and then any other pieces of information that they needed to know for the continuity planning workshops. Perhaps though, the most important piece of information, and this goes back to the framing of continuity planning, perhaps the most important piece of information that I relayed to my teammates throughout the entirety of the process, starting with this email, was to remind them that no matter the risk that we uncovered, no one teammate carries the entire weight of that risk. As a team, we were going to come together to control the controllables, and really we were in this together to figure out a path forward. And this phrase, control the controllables, I think I heard it on a Rich Roll podcast over the last year, but it really stuck with me as we were going through all of these workshops. Focus on what you can control. And like I said, I use very similar language and framing, even in our regular type of risk management workshops that we would run. All right, so here's a brief overview of the lift in terms of time that continuity planning would take, at least for your first rounds. You may find that on larger projects, you need a bit more time, but what we're looking at generally is about 6 days or just about a week and a total of an hour and 45 minutes for the team to arrive at a really actionable plan to ensure their project's success. So the intention here is that it's intended to be lightweight so that teammates can move through it without also disrupting their current work. So let's focus now on days 1 through 4 when teammates are working in what I called workbooks. Okay, so day 1. I distributed what I called workbooks. They were Google Docs that had on, I think across 5 or 6 different pages, various charts that would contain the information you see on these slides. So on day 1, teammates independently would spend 5 to 10 minutes noting the various activities or tasks that they perform regularly in their role on a project. And they begin by thinking about the activities that they and solely they contribute towards or manage. The teammate would answer the questions that you see here on the slide. Who are the teammates that you interact with to carry out this task? Is there a teammate who authorizes the task who might be blocked if you're unable to do that particular piece of work? And do you have any documentation that you can link to here referencing the task? So the goal here, what you'll see in days 1 through 4, is we're really starting to identify dependencies and silos. So now day 2, teammates still independently are spending 10 minutes in their workbook, now focusing on systems and tooling. So here, team members are going to note the internal and external systems that they work with, the teammates on the projects, on their project who also knows that system or tool, the type of impact that tool has on their work, and then a description of the impact if they know it. Um, sometimes oftentimes what I uncovered here was that only one person on a team may know a particular, say, complexity around a deployment, or the process by which we're managing content of the site alongside the client. So it's really important when you're looking through this to focus on any areas where there's only one teammate who knows a particular tool or system. And then day 3, we're focusing on client interactions. So you can see the trend here is to kind of looking at the across the various roles and disciplines that you may have on a team. So day 3, with client interactions, teammates identify the ways that they interact, whether one-on-one or in a team setting with a client or a group of project stakeholders. They start to consider all the most critical feedback loops with the client, and they jot that down in their workbook. Again, this should take about 10 minutes or so. And they're noting who they're interacting with on the client team, the cadence that they're meeting with them, whether it's monthly, quarterly, weekly, and any other teammates that are present for that interaction. And day 4 is intended to serve as a 10 or 15-minute day of reflection and refining. The teammate still working independently will review what they have so far from days 1 through 3, and with fresh eyes, we'll add in any information that may be missing. They then start to consider what may stand out as a risk, however great or minimal, should they need to be out of the office. I generally will ask the teammate to think through the 3 questions that you see here. What might slow the team down? Do you see any key milestones within the project that are at risk? And did you uncover any blind spots when you reflected on your role in the project? As a tip, I find when we're talking about risks, sometimes teammates may not know really what qualifies as a risk. So I'll generally ask them, what's making you nervous after you've gone through this exercise? Is there anything that's making you nervous? And that's when I start to hear more about risks. So the teammate will list out the risks that they've identified. They start to take a best guess of whether the risk or the level of impact really might be high, medium, or low. And that fully wraps up the workbook portion of continuity planning. So over the course of 4 days, we're looking at a teammate working about 45 minutes on this dependency mapping and silo identifying exercise. And that brings you to phase 2 of continuity planning, where the team does a pre-mortem together. During the pre-mortem, this is really when the team will come together for the first time and start to review all the risks that teammates identified together, and then later start to determine a mitigation strategy for those risks. A pre-mortem, even standalone without the workbooks, is a really great way at any point in a project to look ahead at the challenges that could cause a project to veer off course before they even happen. I know on the larger projects that I typically will help manage, we do these workshops maybe 2-3 times, sometimes with a full team, sometimes with a smaller group. But it really helps you to start to identify points of vulnerability and account for them early. So let's check out together what a team pre-mortem looks like. So to start, the pre-mortem should be 50 minutes of uninterrupted time. Generally, I'll ask teammates just put away your email or turn down Slack or put your away message on Slack, and focus just on the risks and working through this together as a team. I should note, prior to the pre-mortem, I do ask that teammates send me their workbooks as the teammate who generally in either the facilitator or lead role of the pre-mortem. This gives me time to pre-process some of the risks and be best prepared really to facilitate the workshop. So at the start of the pre-mortem, it's generally good practice to set some session agreements. They are not rules, but they're codes that the team will honor during the meeting together. Here are some of my favorite examples from former Palantiri workshops. Just because you smelt it doesn't mean you dealt it. Another way of saying we're all in this together. Keep it simple and light, and ask questions along the way. So once you have your session agreements in place, that's when teammates begin to share their risks. I use a Google Jamboard and have a different slide for each teammate to put their risks in terms of like using sticky notes on, and we go through that one by one. That's a really great tool, but you can really use any collaborative virtual tool to do the trick. So start by asking a volunteer to share their risks. And at this point, there's really no risk or problem that's off limits. Everyone is encouraged to share their risks or to share their worries, no matter how big or small, across every area of the project. Because remember, we're all in it together. Now, during this time, I do typically avoid solutioning, and I focus really on getting everything out on the table. Sometimes I'll either see in chat or you hear a teammate say that this is the really hard part, hearing all of the risks out loud. This is where having really strong empathetic communication skills and fostering that psychologically safe environment is absolutely crucial. It is really hard to hear risks to your project. But what I found has worked to uplift my teammates is to remind them that it's a whole lot better of a feeling to be predicting risks and then coming up with a plan to mitigate them than it is for risks to be realized and then be in it and trying to figure out how to navigate that really complex space. That's never a good feeling, and it's one that I'm sure we've all encountered throughout our careers. So usually when I remind teammates that we're in a position where we're forecasting risks and we can come up with a proactive plan to navigate them, that generally will, I see a big turnaround, I think, for the teams, and it ensures that you're really in a psychologically safe space. So next, teammates vote on the risks that they would like to devise mitigation strategies for. And there are generally 3 criteria that I'll prompt the team with. The first is to identify showstoppers, so this is anything that's really mission critical. The second is to identify risks that are likely to happen, or they're the elephant in the room. And then third, make sure that you're focusing on risks that you have control over or influence over. Because remember, you're trying to control the controllables throughout this process. And then at this point, this is when the team will put on their problem-solving hard hats. You've narrowed down your list of risks, which congratulations, that really is the hardest part. And next, you want to guide your team through creating proactive solutions. I find I also have to remind teammates that, just because you may own the next action item related to a risk, it does not mean you are the risk owner of that entire risk. It means that you're taking the immediate next action step to reduce the likelihood or the impact of that risk, but it doesn't all fall on your shoulders. Risk mitigation, particularly related to continuity planning, is 100% a team effort. And that brings us to day 6. This is when you're sharing and comparing your continuity plans. So to encourage an environment of transparency, of openness, and of support, I do encourage that continuity plans for all projects and all disciplines are shared are shared at the company level. And the reason is because at times continuity plans really need to be developed in a way that cross projects. So if you think of in the most recent case with the pandemic, it's very possible that one teammate's outage, say they need to step away from their computer for whatever reason, it's possible that one teammate's outage could cross 2 or 3 projects or internal initiatives. So it's really important to have a smaller group, either of the project managers or business leaders, who can come together to review your continuity plans. If everyone said that the same one teammate is going to be providing them backup if they need to be out of the office, you do not have a solid continuity plan. Because if that one teammate is out of the office, then that impacts everyone. So you really want to make sure that you're creating a mesh across your projects. Now that essentially wraps up the full continuity planning process that we went through at Palantir.net at the inception of the pandemic and then throughout. So what's next? Well, I do encourage you to share this practice out at your company. Give it a shot. I found that once I went through the process a few times, it did get easier. And not only did it get easier, but interesting enough, it started to embed itself in our project teams. We were reminded really that we should avoid silos in roles or in disciplines on projects, and that because we had a psychologically safe environment, we could and should talk about risk to projects or worries that could impact the project, more regularly and openly. So it does get easier. It does get somewhat more comfortable, and the process does start to embed itself within your project and within your company, which is really quite remarkable to see. So with that, thank you. I've included my LinkedIn information here. If you want to test out this continuity planning practice, and you encounter any challenges or you find ways to make it better and to elevate the practice, I want to hear from you, and I encourage you to share back your learnings and your experience with the whole community. So please do feel free to reach out either over LinkedIn or email to continue the conversation and promote continuous learning together. So thank you. And I'm happy to answer if there's a question or two. I'm happy to provide some insight here if you have any. Thank you, everyone.